And kind folks out there, welcome to RPG with DBJ. If you are into long form content, a minimum of an hour each day, Monday through Friday, thank you for joining me. This is the place for you. Here, we like to take a subject, we stretch it all the way through the week, and then subdivide it with different themes, or maybe different themes all week and subdivide it with different subjects. Whichever way it may be, we are talking about winter, the winter season, snowy places, frozen landscapes, and the whole 9 yards, right? And all the things that deal with such a subject. For example, in a few of the comments that were made as we started on Monster Monday and Discord Tuesday and World Building Wednesday, one of the comments was made that, different types of like hearty meals are very important. And when you're working in extremely sub-zero temperatures, slips, trips, and falls are not only dangerous, but sometimes they can even be deadly. And the comment was even brought up that a lot of equipment and things, even those that are adapted for cold weather, might not work too well when you're out there in freezing temperatures. So if there's a complex item with a lot of small moving parts that are oiled, but not where the oil isn't designed to be in its smooth or liquid form in sub-zero temperatures, you can have a lot of problems. I go all the way back to ice road truckers. Now, today is Thursday, and Thursday is reserved for third pillar. Third pillar Thursday refers to the third pillar of exploration in tabletop role-playing games. So you have yourself combat as a pillar, probably your first pillar, a social interaction as your second pillar, but there's this third pillar down here that tends to be underutilized as far as through my anecdotal relationship with role-playing games. And I love the idea of location. It's the idea that the environment you're in and around that you can use and abuse has more than just not that it's not important, but it has more than just a narrative feeling to it, but it has a mechanical feeling to it as well, and that it can become quite important, dynamic, and really change or force your players to reconsider tactics. NPCs using it to their benefit, PCs using it to enhance their effectiveness, especially for those player characters that um, are not primarily designed to do the typical thing in a lot of role-playing games, which is hit early, hit often, and hit the hardest. So, and a perfect example of using the environment and having someone become more effective, where doing damage and hitting harder isn't necessarily a metric, is I'll go back to a classic movie scene you've probably seen plenty of times in all of your movie, TV, book watching, graphic novels, or what have you. Enemies run across a frozen lake, and your heroes are on one side of the frozen lake or trying to cross it before the enemy crosses this frozen lake. And of course, there is the foreshadow of the lake cracking from the weight of so many participants on this slippery, sliding frozen lake. And of course, you have your heroes. Maybe there's an archer in the group, and they're blasting, one or more of the barbaric horde that comes after them. And one of the characters looks down at the ice, and is like, you know what? I know how to keep ourselves away from the enemy. And yells to their friends, "Go, go, go!" And everyone's like, "No, don't do it!" And they pick up their hammer slash axe or fist or whatever the case may be, and they attempt to crack the ice. And so instead of being the character that does the most damage and hits the hardest, instead they become effective in breaking the ice and forcing the barbaric or goblinoid horde that's coming after them to the forward leading edge falling into the ice and drowning and freezing to death, the group behind them pushing others into um, the frozen lake behind them, yet more trying to hold on to what are now little slippery islands of ice floating as the PCs and their allies and stuff make their way to the other side of the frozen lake, trying to escape the exploding cracks that are cracking across the ice. And of course, the hero may or may not survive their attempt to stand in the middle of the frozen lake to crack the damn thing. And so this is a case where the environment makes this one particular character far more effective. And you can go on and on. Now, since we're talking about winter, and we did talk about this, of course, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but it needs to be said where anything from dangerous pits in the snow and watching your step because you may fall into a crevice or a crack or an open chamber that may be below you as you're walking across the frozen tundra, to the threat of avalanches, to walking through frozen ice caverns and being impaled by very large and very sharp icicles dangling from the ceiling if you're making too much noise, or some kind of vibrational effect happens either from an explosion or the sounds of battle, or an explosive force goes off. All of these things, I think, can really reshape what many call the battlefield, the field of battle with your PCs against their adversaries or NPCs or enemies, and change those things so that all of a sudden now they have to worry about where they step, how fast they move. Are there other dangers, especially on ice? Sure, there is the typical falling prone and using an action to stand up, but what if standing up requires, say, an acrobatics check to stand up, or a dexterity saving throw not to get knocked down after being hit with enough force to elicit a chance to knock someone down? There's also the possibility that in a snowy tundra, of course, you're at the minimum through thick snow. You have yourself. Excuse me. Where's all this hair coming from? Thanks, kitties. There's also the threat of not only just difficult terrain, but that terrain could shift and change. Like, for example, maybe in ankle to thigh deep snow, sure, that's difficult terrain, but maybe there are snowdrifts that are even taller that might act as half cover, three-quarters cover, and or full cover for all of those that are for all the participants that are acting in and around this particular region. And of course, you can have yourself frozen icicles that almost act as stalactites and stalagmites, whether you're out in the wilderness and there are mountainous areas with boulders and frozen trees. Of course, the trees might be leafless unless they're like evergreens or some version of foliage thereof that can also act as cover as well. And you don't know what's under the snow. So the snow could cover a rocky area or a place with lots of exposed roots or other things that are tripping hazards. Hell, even snow that's fallen onto the bodies of hundreds or even thousands of dead warriors because of a huge battlefield. And lo and behold, sure, there's a couple of spears and pikes and shields sticking up out of the snow, but you may not be able to detect where the numerous dead frozen bodies are. And again, they may become tripping hazards to have you trip and fall, and then again, trying to stand up may be a thing. Also, dropping something in the snow, especially something small or delicate or silver or white, might not be the smartest thing in the world as well. So, dropping something might be kind of difficult to find it. Those of us that have dropped eyeglasses, keys, and other small items in I don't know, a few inches of snow will feel the panic of like, oh no, I dropped my car keys, and now you got to feel more than see where it was, and you're like retracing your steps in the snow. So yeah, that's also a possibility as well. And then and that can change the landscape also, and um, not just having fights in the snow and difficult terrain and the chance of like something slippery or tripping over something you can't see in the snow, but there's also yeah, yeah, Owen's like, yeah, you'll find your keys when spring comes around, which is a thing too. That's a real thing. As a matter of fact, myself as a letter carrier, working for the Postal Service, we have every day we have something called a Plan 5 talk, where we talk for 5 minutes about um, things going on in the neighborhood, hazards, new changes to policies, and just reminding us of being safe. It's a constant reminder of being safe. And one of the problems is during the snowy season, lots of people have landscaping out there, and they have like those shorty little wire fences that go around their landscaping and their flowers and things, and you can't see them. You can't see the little yard gnomes and other small things they have out in their yard. And hell, one of the most dangerous things are plastic wrapped newspapers and those plastic political signs and advertising signs that have like it's just two wires that stick in the ground, and then it's just a plastic sign. They get blown over in the wind, and then they get covered with snow, and when you step on those things, there is no traction. You will just slip and fall, twist an ankle, bruise your ego, those kind of things. So we always talk about watching out for that, and just being aware to make a big circumference around someone's landscaping, because it's very easy to get your foot trapped into a garden hose that was left there over the winter season. I mean, over from spring and summer, and then all of a sudden it snows, and now there's something you could trip on. Now, in addition to all of that, when it comes to the winter season, of course, we talk about heavy snow and blizzards, and that can reduce visibility. And we brought up the old Grognardian era. I believe first and second edition had infravision, which doesn't exist anymore. Of course, you can bring it in your game anytime you feel like it, but dark vision doesn't allow you to see through blizzards. So while there might be, I mean, it's not just blizzards, they're called whiteouts. As a matter of fact, for myself and Joseph Keenan, who takes part in these talks, we live in Ohio, and he's far northern than I am, and they get something called lake effect snow. And lake effect snow is when the temperature drops to freezing sub-zero temperatures, and then a wind will come across a watery surface, usually a lake, a river, pretty substantial size. And because of the Great Lakes here in the US, the lake effect snow, usually moving from west to east, will grab the moisture above the lake and then form it into snow, and then dump it down onto the cities that border, and it can travel quite a number, dozens of miles inland, hell, if not hundreds, and dump that snow into the city. So while it's not technically, air quotes, snowing from the clouds, it is snowing because of lake effect snow. And um, yeah, Game Master Toolbox says, I keep hearing about these lies, what they call winter, which brings something called snow. Yeah, you're not the. Hey, listen, we've got Omen in the chat on the Discord, and Omen lives in Thailand. He's worried about ash from volcanoes. So those of you who live in the latitudes where snow is a thing you you barely hear about, that is spoken of in legend, I feel for you. Not feel for you in a bad way. It's like, oh, I want to embrace that so much. But yes, whiteouts are a thing. So lake effect snow can bring a whiteout. And when a whiteout comes, I'm sorry, Philippines, I apologize. Why did I think of Thailand? Maybe I'm just an idiot. I apologize for that, Omen. No, he's talking in the Philippines, but there is that band around the equator that that repels the cold temperatures on Earth. Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. Oh, now um, the when a whiteout happens, it's possible that visibility can literally drop to zero. So when visibility drops um, to the point where you literally can't see the hand that is reached out in front of you, there's no way around it. And of course, you have people who are driving on highways, and that's where you get these major pileups, 30, 40, 50, 60 car pileups, because even if you're traveling, you reduce your speed down to 25, 35, 45 miles an hour on American highways. Um, you there's no way you have any ability to stop if your visibility is 5 feet in front of you. And unfortunately, headlights just reflect off of the snow, so they actually don't penetrate deeper. They're actually reflecting back into your face. So yeah, it happens pretty annually, I would say. At least in the northern portions of Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York and that kind of thing. But I'm sure it happens many other places. Yeah, Scott Post says, "You're welcome here in Arizona. Any freezing winter you choose." Yeah. Oh man, I I am as you can tell by the grays, I am on my downslide to retiring. My wife and I cannot wait to retire. So we will be moving towards warmer climes when the opportunity presents itself. Yeah, not that it doesn't have its own problems. Hey, let's not forget that's not the only thing. But yeah, winter and shoveling snow and having a car parked outside and having to scrape the ice off of it on a daily basis, it's terrible. We come up with so many different ways to avoid that as well. Plastic bags and buying windshield shields and all that kind of business. But anyway, yep. Omen says the problem with more tropical areas are floods, and I would say flooding, rain, monsoon, maybe humidity is another possibility. Um, more, of course, we've brought this up later on about uh, bandits and wild animals in the winter regions, but the more warm and the more life is able to survive in places that don't have extreme temperatures, the more dangers you have from uh, living creatures, livestock, um, anything from insects to bacteria to predatory animals and I guess you could say pestilent animals, animals that grow uncontrolled and then have an effect on the environment as well. So you have those things, which we could bring that up we could do a whole week of that as well. Now, the what I love about using the environment, this Third Pillar Thursday, what I love about using the environment there are a number of, I'll say, GM or DM tools when using the environment, and I think it replaces or actually makes better the idea of using layers and traps, puzzles, obstacles, hazards, and all of that combined together to make something unique. So, um, I've gone through this. I'll make this very short because I've done hour-long plus videos on using these concepts. But first of all, you have yourself your static effects, right? So you want your players to go into the tall mountains, the northern region of your world. It's cold, it's frozen landscape. So you want the environment to affect them. So you want to pick something static. And the most common static effect in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is difficult terrain. Now, whatever game you're playing, I'm sure they have probably a small handful, probably 1 to 3 static effects you can add to your game, whether the terrain causes difficulty, there's some kind of visual hazard, or what have you. Okay, and a static effect is basically something that you don't roll for it. You don't. It's just something that overlays the world. Your movement is halved. Your ability to see far is reduced, or something of that nature. Okay, so you have yourself a static effect. Now there are um, hazards, and I'll differentiate a hazard from an obstacle. A hazard is like something that requires you to actively or passively resist whatever it may be, and it just overlays the entire region. In a wintry region, that would be frigid temperatures. And so this hazard, whether you are an adversary, an enemy, a PC, can affect you unless you are partially with resistance or fully immune to the region. Okay, so of course your polar bears, your winter wolves, your yeti, and such would be completely immune. You don't have to keep rolling these things, but maybe in frigid temperatures you have to worry about frostbite, um, and having numb fingers and hands, worrying about suffering exhaustion from trudging through the snow, those kind of things. And so periodically, once an hour, once every 10 minutes, once every round, trips and falls and things of that nature, you have to resist, or you suffer some kind of loss of strength or dexterity or constitution. Game Master's Toolbox says wind would also cause problems to hear each other. Absolutely. Now, again, wind has its own, like, wind is a thing that causes a number of problems, right? Wind can be loud. Those of you, even if you don't live in a place that gets seasonal snows, if you've ever been in, like, for example, the center of the United States is Tornado Alley, right? And those of you on the, like, Carolinas, Florida, here in the States, Louisiana, Alabama, Texas, when you get those Caribbean hurricanes, when the wind comes in and you cannot hear. I mean, it's loud, it whistles, it sometimes people say that when the hurricanes or tornadoes come, it sounds like a freight train. And so in order to communicate with someone, let's say you charm the ogre, but you're too far away for the ogre to even hear your commands. So sure, you charm the ogre, and the ogre's just standing there swaying back and forth while you're trying to scream in its ear to attack one of its own ogreish what used to be one of its own ogreish allies, while you're trying to run for cover because the winds are coming by and ripping the roofs off of homes and things like that, right? And add to that frigid temperatures and whiteouts, and yeah. Yeah, dead man. Like, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, Toto. hell, hell yeah. Um, but that brings, like, here I am flowing into like hurricanes and tornadoes and monsoons and things like that. But that's the same can be said for frigid areas as well. And I'll get to your comment in a minute there, Scott. But like Game Master's Toolbox brought up, wind can severely limit, if not kill, your sniper characters, right? The ones that fire, shoot, something that at range. Yeah, wind could severely limit those abilities. Now, sure, you might go, well, that lightning bolt, you're fine, but if you're using a flamethrower, or you're blasting fire out of your fingertips, or shooting an arrow, or even using some kind of other crossbow or a firearm or something, wind has a extreme effect on ranged attacks. Now, you might want to have a little bit of a conversation or adjudicate, like, yeah, if you're going to throw a grenade or a Molotov cocktail or use your arrow or crossbow, going to have to add some disadvantage to that. Maybe lasers from your eyes or a lightning bolt, maybe not, but who knows? Why not? uh, Scott Poe brings up snow blindness, and the sun glaring off the snow is also a possibility, maybe limiting how far away, or causing like the sunbursts that happen in your eyes temporarily if you don't wear sunglasses, which is not just protecting your face, but is another reason why people in the winter wear goggles and sunglasses and things like that, and those wraparound sunglasses that prevent that snow glare. You'll see often a lot of people who are snow bunnies that will wear special goggles that not only keep the ice and frost out of their face and their eyeballs from freezing, but also keep their tears from freezing to their face. And you'll see that orangey, orangish yellow cast on the glass of those things to keep the sun glare from so that it reflects back outwards, not just keeping UV rays out of their eyes, which is also a possibility as well. Um, Joseph Keenan says, talks about the nor'easter. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, nor'easters are a thing. Um, El Ninos and El Ninas are are uh, are a big problem here in the States and Canada and stuff. Yep, nor'easters, he says, are like hurricanes, but in winter. Yummy ice storms. And I mean, these are the things I think that can really, for me, the environment is basically, for me, is that one thing that I feel is like underutilized that can take most of your pretty boring and staid and like common encounters where everyone's just like, oh, I've seen this before, and without necessarily ramping up, needing to buy another monster manual, without having to worry about messing with a lot of creature stat blocks and things like that. I feel like it's the one thing that can really, really bump up your encounters, right? I mean, what's the most common, most boring encounter you can have, and that's starting out a game with goblinoids, right? In your classic Dungeons and Dragons, some bandits on the road. But imagine if you're attacked by these goblinoids and you're in the middle of a nor'easter, a blizzard, a whiteout, or something. Sure, you may be able to see the three enemies in front of you, but you can hear the footsteps of a dozen, 2 dozen. You can't see them. How many times have any of us looked up in our spellcasting books and looked up, hey, my hands are numb, can I use this spell? Oh, it has a somatic component, I'm going to have disadvantage on my arcane check to do it, right? How many times have we looked up for our spells that you must be able to see your target in order to use it on an enemy or an ally? And if you can't see them through, past your 10-foot block square, because it's there's so much, the blizzard is throwing up so much dense snow, or a wind, not a dust storm. I was thinking of I'm thinking of a dust devil, but in a wintry region, that someone casts a gust of wind, kicks up a bunch of soft snow, and now no one can see, or someone casts a fog cloud up in a wintry location, and everyone's just like freezing from the fog. Ice devils, I guess. Yeah, I guess they'd be called ice devils. And all of a sudden, this thing spins around and picks up this powdery snow, and now no one can see. Yeah, for me, I like that. And as a matter of fact, along with static effects and obstacles where you have to roll, you also have yourself random effects. And one great hint to use random effects, and I'm going to bring up, which I don't, and I'm glad they host me over here at Fantasy Grounds College. But in the virtual tabletop, you're able to place things like traps and creatures in or if you're using miniatures or something like that, you can place things down on the tabletop, and you can see where it is. And there's nothing stopping you from putting obstacles and the environment down in those locations, which would normally represent, say, a chair, a wall, a trap, or something like that. And then that thing can possibly move around the battlefield. If there's an ice devil and not the static blocked ice devil creature with the tail and from the one of the levels of hell. I'm talking about like a wintry tornado type of thing moving around, freezing you to death, or picking up an errant PC or NPC. That thing could move around the battlefield, adding some chaos and forcing people to like, oh, I was going to use my burning hand spell, but now that my adversary, this blast of snow and wind is between me and my adversary, I'm going to have to change my tactics and find cover or move around or find another target, or instead I'm going to heal one of my allies instead of blasting the enemy or something like that, you know. Game Master's Toolbox says predators are a given, but a herbivore with horns can be very aggressive and dangerous. Hell yeah, especially if panicked or backed into a corner. The in I plug there is a cinematic environs called the Plains, and it deals with herds of herbivoric animals. You actually there are roll tables to make up your own random exotic exotic herd. But yeah, herds of animals. Sometimes they can number in the dozens to hundreds to thousands to even millions. At one point across the United States, there were literally millions of like bison, buffalo, those kind of animals roaming across the landscape, and they are both dangerous and act as cover as well. Yeah. Um, yeah, of course. Any living creature that's going to be panicked and backed into a corner and to defend itself or defend its young could be quite dangerous. Many of them, while passive, have pretty dangerous hooves and or horns, and tend to have a lot of heavy weight to them, so they'll just trample you to death anyway to escape. Tesla Ranger brings up, or your liquid material components froze. Yeah, those. What is it? Anything from oil to holy water, which, holy water. A frozen vial of holy water does it still contain its holy resonance, even if it's a block of ice? Holy snowball, I guess it would be. I'm going to throw my holy ice chunk at the at the vampire. The vampire's like laughing at you because it's just the glass breaks around your holy vial of water, and you toss it at his head, and it like bings him in the head. It burns, and he's like, "Ow, wait." But sure, I guess. I hadn't considered that. Might be something to think about. Yeah. Yeah. Joseph Keenan says, "Ouch! Herds of horses or buffalo in winter in a winter storm with whiteout conditions." Yeah. I mean, there's no set telling. Now, of course, the PCs are going to be in the middle. They're always in the storm of conflict, right? They're the ones either causing the danger or running into the danger or running away from the danger, but it'll be there, right? So if something causes a huge herd to panic, maybe an avalanche, maybe an explosion, the smell of blood after something is killed. One of the PCs is like, my pyromancer is going to cast a fireball, and everyone's like, please don't do that. And all of a sudden, a big ball of fire goes up, and this herd starts, trampling around. I mean, could you imagine? You're facing off against your rival. You draw your blade. Your rival's got their pike with their blackened armor, and your paladin faces them and finally finds them in this frigid landscape. And all of a sudden, you hear this like stampede. You hear this freight train of noise, and barely seen through the wintry snow. As you look to the west, you just see snow being kicked up in these dark faces, and the buffalo are breathing out warm air through their nostrils. And then what do? Do you attack your rival knowing you might get trampled? Do you duck down into the snow hoping they don't run over you? Do you try to run with the herd, so though at least you're keeping their momentum? I mean, what the hell happens then? And so throwing, you guys know I did a whole week of what I call triangles. It's this third component you can throw into the game. So yeah, herds, kind of cool. Yeah, Joseph Keenan says the herd doesn't matter if it is in combat or not. 5 feet visibility and and a huge critter is the issue. Hell yeah. And so here you go, making rolls to see if you do you roll to well, I did make mechanical things. But here's the thing: is it a strength versus strength before you get knocked down or pushed over or knocked out the way, or you are separated from, you're standing in the middle of this herd as it rushes past you, because of course the herd's scared of you, just as much scared of you as whatever panicked them, and maybe you and your rival now are separated by getting separated further and further away. And of course, in between, you have yourself some meat shields, and you also have a little bit of cover, especially if something or someone is adapted to the region, they might be able to use the herd as a place to hide. But if the herd isn't panicked, what a great way for your PCs to sneak up on, say, an enemy that is traveling or trying to avoid the herd. But your PC ranger and druid are like, no, 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 hide, duck down. We'll hide it within the herd just to make sure that we're safe or something. You know what I mean? And heck, I would gather even some of your PCs might be able to befriend members of that herd to find some place warm to sleep, i.e., sleeping in and amongst the warm hide of the animals in the herd. So again, the environment should be used and abused, and if it's being abused, you can then use it for your own benefit. Whether it's eating one of those herd animals or sleeping against their warm hide to stay warm during the winter season. Now, along with static things, hazards, you have yourself, of course, obstacles. So an obstacle could be a pit, a wall, something to scamper over, under, to move around, to lift and move out of your way, to be careful that you don't disturb it, or something like that. Obstacles like physical obstacles, going across a crevice and there is a tree that has fallen across a crevice. Do you try to balance yourself across the tree? And we've seen this plenty of times. Tree, a ladder, an iron girder, someone knocks down a pole, or whatever effect to go across a rooftop, a vast ravine in a jungle or a forest. And of course, we're talking about winter season as well, knocking down a large tree or an icicle or something, and going on hands and knees, or putting your hands out to balance yourself and just going 1 foot at a time across this fallen frozen tree that you've cut down, or just happens to be there to go across this giant crevice or something. Maybe a big chunk of snow has tumbled down the mountainside, broken off, and fallen laterally across a giant crevice for the PCs to escape or go after an enemy. And so there is a temporary bridge of sorts that might be slippery itself, or might crumble if too much weight is put on it, to scamper across a thing. And again, here's the environment. And what happens maybe? Throw some enemies in there, right? One PC goes across the bridge, two more NPCs are walking across the temporary chunk of snow that's, I don't know, 30 feet or a couple of dozen meters long, or whatever the case might be, to get to the other side. And what happens? Maybe there are, I don't know, winter kobolds flying on, white bats or something, or, I don't know, pterodactyls. Well, okay, maybe not in the winter regions, but you get my point, right? Some flying creatures come by. Maybe there's some enemies on a ridge that are tossing javelins down on the PCs. What do? Do you go across this? Do you run across the bridge faster, knowing you're going to have disadvantage on your acrobatics check, or do you move slower, knowing that, hey, if I move at half speed, can I gain advantage on it? Yeah, I'll give you advantage on that if you move at half speed, but it's going to take you twice as long or 3 times as long, or whatever the case might be. So you have that. And then of course you have yourself your I brought up before, your random effects. Maybe you have a 4, 6, 8 number of random things that might happen in your winter wonderland as your PCs are traveling through. Maybe there are, you have listed, you have your little 3x5 cards, or your Google Doc or OneNote doc, and you're like, okay, I'm going to have a blizzard that's going to cause disadvantage. I'm going to have a whiteout that just basically blinds everyone. I'm going to have snow tumbling down, and they're going to have to make strength checks or dex checks or maybe any of the above to avoid it. If they don't avoid it, they're going to be covered in snow and restrained, and they're going to have to dig their way out like, as if they're grappled or something. Maybe you have to worry about, we talked about ice pits. I mean, pits in the snow because of the snow that's covering up gaps in the ice and such. So maybe there's something like that. Again, reskinning your pit traps, reskinning your collapsing ceilings with the spikes and snow and ice and things crumbling from above you inside of caverns, or on giant trees, or going through a mountain pass or something of that nature. Joseph Keenan brings up, oh, a week or so ago, there are rare lightning in a snowstorm. Yeah, there are. It's rare, but it does happen that there are there's thunder. I guess they call it thunder snow sometimes, where for some strange reason there is electrical activity in snowstorms, which is bizarre. It's not bizarre. It's just a rarity, almost as rare as thunder and lightning without rain. Although that does happen, I think, more often just because of ozone and such, as well as hail and is a possibility. Hail could be a thing. It could be deadly in your world, much like um, snow and ice blowing so hard it's like razor shards as well. If you want to go very arcane or very extreme, especially in a sci-fi um, effect, if you're in a place which has very extreme temperatures. Deadman says the primary target of the plane seems to be wind turbines. Yeah, both natural and unnatural, right? I mean, who's to say that there isn't some intelligent force behind the thing that's happening. Now, that brings us to Deadman kind of hints a little bit. That brings us to the idea of layers. Now, an unspoken element of layers is that the creature that has a lair kind of controls the lair to their benefit, as opposed to the lair being an independent thing that exists in the wild, and the creature just happens to live there. And so for me, the environment is very much independent of the creatures that live there. Not that it doesn't benefit their experience living there. You know, of course, a yeti and winter wolves love a blizzard, a good old blizzard that you know waylays the warm entities, the warm creatures that happen to be coming up into their winter wonderland. But using one or any number of elements in your world and having those creatures live there and having it benefit their abilities, I think makes perfect sense, right? Being attacked by an alligator in a swamp, it's not as if the alligator is in its quote-unquote lair mechanically, although it is in a place where it's not just being attacked by the alligator, it's being attacked by the alligator while you're in waist-deep, murky water, being dragged down, and then a possibility of being drowned where there's no place for you to stand, and the alligator goes into its tumble roll to shred your body, right? So same thing with sharks, same thing with these winter predators. It's not the yeti, it's the yeti blending in the snow, snatching you away in a blizzard, because pulling you down underneath the snow like a wampa, from your player characters, your allies, who don't see you disappear into the snowbank because the yeti just grabbed you around your throat and your mouth and intends on eating you later as it freezes your feet up into the ceiling and you drop your laser sword. Sorry, segue. Now, Scott Poe says we get heat lightning when it's hot and dry enough, which is a thing, and Can we turn the volume up to 11 on a number of these things? Hell yeah. Yeah, sure, there are thunderstorms, and very rarely do people get struck by lightning, but yeah, we're playing a role-playing game. Could someone get struck by lightning on a 1 in 20? 5% chance? It's pretty high. Hell, go for it, right? What are you wearing, plate mail? Let's bump that bonus up to about maybe a 1 in 4 chance, right? I mean, that's a possibility as well. So, um, going into other, well, even though there's thunder snow, um, sure, why not? Why couldn't we have those things? And why couldn't there be an intelligent um, adversary who has placed themselves into a place that has the most dangerous elements in and around them, that ice hag that's up there in the wintry region, of course is going to protect themselves. And like Deadman says, primary targets of blame seems to be these wind turbines. Maybe there is a real mechanical wind turbine that someone's using. Maybe the gnomes or dwarves have created something in the mountains that blow these vast, that enhance, like a ramjet, enhance the winds that blow through the mountain valleys to increase the chances that as the PCs try to trudge up the snowy embankment, the wind's just blasting against their faces, um, with their failed dex or acrobatics checks, they get blown back down the hill or blown back down the snowdrift, only to have to walk, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of thing. Joseph Keenan says, we have storms over the lake that doesn't make landfall. You can see some cold water spouts and lightning. Oh, really? And actually, if you live in a region where you're able to see, like you live in a place where it's very flat. Here in Ohio, it's pretty flat, and there's many states in the U.S. that where you can see for miles and miles, and you can see these storms gather and are pretty violent the could become quite violent on the horizon. You can see them heading towards you, which is pretty dangerous itself. Which I'm going to get to your other comment there, little poem there, Joseph Keenan. But the other thing that I think is a drawback. I'm going to get to puzzles and traps, but let me get to traps. Uh, Traps suck, okay. And while having a dungeon with your pit trap, arrow trap, poison dark trap, collapsing ceiling trap, um, stairs that turn into a flat ramp trap are kind of cute. A lot of times it's difficult for us to rationalize why they're in the dungeon in the first place. And even if it makes sense for them to be in the dungeon in the first place, it can be quite impersonal and feel like a gotcha more than overcoming a terrible encounter and feeling good on the other side, right? So, in other words, as human beings, we feel good when we've gotten to the very top of Mount Everest, right? We There are people who spend their entire lives um, physically, as a human being, overcoming nature's grandest obstacles, um, free diving, holding their breath and trying to dive down as deep as they can, swimming across vast gaps of water, climbing the highest places, going to the hottest and coldest locations, windiest locations, most remote locations, and dominating it as our own human ingenuity and perseverance can do. The same can't be said for, I don't know, scampering across landmines or pit traps or bungee sticks or whatever the case might be, right? It's a different thing. And so, also, foreshadowing traps being somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing. I brought up before the fact that the PCs may know they might slip and fall into a pit trap, get have an avalanche dump snow on top of them, get struck by lightning, get lifted up by high winds, have themselves frozen, the fingers and toes, or suffering frostbite or suffering exhaustion. The fact that they know that's going to happen doesn't lessen the danger that it will happen, right? And placing the PCs in a situation where they have to pick and choose how much danger they are going to encounter, I feel is your best tool in the world. You as a DM just go, here's the situation, you figure it out, which to me comes into the puzzles. Deadman says Japanese pearl divers were oftentimes women and had to dive into freezing water. Yes, in, I believe, if you, I've been to, I haven't been to those exotic places, but if you go to the Carolinas, Myrtle Beach, also if you go to Orlando, Florida, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I hear you, Omen. There are people who are hired to be in the theme parks and things like that, and there are pearl divers. I believe even in, why can I not remember? Anyway, SeaWorld, there, sheesh, why did I know? Anyway, in SeaWorld, there are people who are in watery tanks or are dressed as mermaids and things, and they hold their breath for extremely long periods of time. And especially having to dive down in the freezing water, oh my God, whatever. Joseph Keenan, hail, hail, fire and snow. Call the angel, we will go far away for to see. Friendly angel, come to me. Did you make that up, or is that from something? Let me know. Anyway, puzzles. Or I'll mix puzzles and riddles. Now, riddles are a different thing. Riddles are more literary in the sense that you, oh, it's from Star Trek? I didn't know that. I, hmm, I'm losing my mind because I'm a Trekkie in many ways. All right, so riddles are more literary, usually something written on a wall or parchment or spoken to the PCs, and they have to figure it out. The omen's like makes happy board noises. Excuse me, it's bothering me too much. There we go. Sorry. The A puzzle for me is more of a physical thing, much like oh, thank you, Keenan. Much like the idea of what's a really good puzzle. Okay, you have a fox, a chicken, and corn. The fox will eat the chicken will eat the corn. You have a boat. You can only put two items in the boat at a time. How do you get all three across the river? Right? That's a riddle. Okay, but you don't need to set up situations where you have to have one single answer to get across the riddle. Um, I mean, to get across the river, to get across, to answer the riddle. Um, a To figure a puzzle out, excuse me, is just a matter of creating a situation in which there is a problem and the solution to the problem isn't readily available or on its surface, or the solution to the problem on its surface seems like it would solve the situation, but very quickly you realize it won't. So a boat that can only carry 200 pounds of gold and you have 500 pounds, you're like, this isn't going to work. How do we get this gold across the river, right? Same thing goes with all of the situations that we brought up before when the player characters are involved, right? They need to go into this winter wonderland that you've created for them. Very lethal, very dangerous. There's enemies out there, and they have to make the decision. We need to get across this frozen lake. We can go very fast, but if we go fast and we all go together, there is a greater chance we're going to crack the ice, fall through, slip and fall, whatever the case might be. Or we can go extremely slow, being very careful, but that means it's going to take us longer to get across this lake. We have a third problem. We are going to be attacked by enemies. We hear the wolves coming down off of the mountain. We hear the baying of the Yetis as they're going to attack us. What do we do? That is a puzzle. Is there an answer to it? Yes, the answer is whatever the PCs come up with, right? Create the problems, but don't create the solutions, and allow the solutions to be more than one thing. Um, we've all, you guys are brilliant. We've all heard of the horror stories of the game master that creates the riddle or the puzzle, sits back and watches their players flounder around for hours and hours because the game master's like, well, there's only one way to solve it, and then lets the PCs, never giving them a hint, never giving them an option, never giving them a die roll, and just lets them flounder around for hours and hours. That is not good game mastering, and that's not fun at all. You know what I mean? Yeah, Joseph Keenan's like, it was the why is my brain freezing? The Quaker Oats alien? I don't, Quaker Oats alien on the V episode where the colony was killed except for the kids, and the children shall lead. Oh, that was the name of the episode. Okay, my brain was just like, what the hell? You're fine. You're fine. I get the reference. A lot of times we, myself and a number of people who do live streams, um our brains can get scattered because we're like looking at chats and we're thinking of the next thing to say, and we want the streams to be engaging and entertaining, but when references are brought up, if it was just us sitting around at a table, we'd get it, but because we're live streaming and there's a little bit of pressure too, we're just like, where's our brain going? I've lost something. My brain has farted. you know but anyway, we are getting close to the hour mark. Yes, the hour mark. And I will say that despite today being the third pillar Thursday, I will say that the other episode, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we brought up a lot of hazards that you can throw into the game. And if for no other reason as me being your self-appointed third pillarist of the RPG community, to, yeah, the original series. I'm thinking of which version? Yes, the original series, the 66 to 68, I think. Um, almost like, what is this terrible hour mark you speak of? Hey, listen, it's nighttime for you, buddy. You get to bed. Um, anyway, well, the point being is that if you really want to take an encounter, um, PCs go up against some kind of random minions or enemies or something like that, use the environment. Whether you guys brought up tropical areas or jungles or mountains, and it doesn't have to be natural environments at all. Abandoned buildings, rooftops, factories, foundries, forges, um, narrow streets, whatever the case might be, sewer systems, starships, abandoned habitats, old castles with ghosts in them or something like that. Whatever the case may be, just use the environment, and to get your players to start thinking about using the environment, have your NPCs do that. And if you think that some of your weaker creatures in whatever game you're playing, especially Dungeons and Dragons, are being useless, are rather useless, and your PCs are out performing them as they gain levels. Now they're fourth level, fifth level, sixth level, and you're like, yeah, hobgoblins, they're just not, they're not, no challenge to them anymore. I guarantee you that while they may not be dominant, having your hobgoblins, let's, as an example, being adapted to the region in which they are placed, having your creatures which are adapted to the region in which they are placed, will make things that much more difficult. So for example, we brought up everything from blizzards to frozen lakes and avalanches and things like that, but if your white bugbears are Yeti like and they are unaffected by these things, your PCs have all of these lowercase disadvantages and drawbacks in this region, the threat of those bugbears and yetis goes way up. Those winter wolves go way up, right? And of course, be setting consistent. So I wouldn't suggest that any and all creatures should all be completely immune to the environment. I'm saying that it should be, create consistency in your setting so that it makes perfect sense that winter wolves and yetis would be, and polar bears and reskinned creatures that are adapted to the winter would be available and adapted to the region. But I will say that those city folk that have that banditry that's running away with the MacGuffin and the PCs are going after them, they should have the same hazards and encounter those same problems as the player characters. Does that mean you may have to roll some saving throws for your own NPCs? Sure. But that may throw some chaos into the mix when one of your bandits falls through an ice shelf into a pit, or one of the NPCs starts screaming at the PCs, and the PCs are like, "Shut up!" and they cause an avalanche. Is that possible? Sure. Um, Barfrin says, "I'm a fan of giving a class level to a low CR monster. Giving them just giving them not, and I'm going to extrapolate on your comment, giving them not just a class level, but just give some of your monsters an ability. Give a bugbear barbarian rage. Like, give a monster some ability to have stealth or something. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of these things actually make a lot more sense than we think of, right? Like, I think a shark already has like berserker rage from blood, but you get my point, right? Having your goblinoids as a perfect example of a boring encounter, giving them barbarian rage or some ability to, well, let's see, bugbears like to sneak up on people, so giving them, what is it, the rogue sneak attack. Yeah, exactly. Spice it up, and then you can foreshadow a little bit of that too, foreshadowing they're they're sneaky and they're hiding in the woods, or you see that their blood is high and they're enraged and they're yelling out a battle cry across the frozen lake, and you're just like, what? And you're like, yeah, they're attacking you, they are enraged, and letting your PCs, if not specifically telling them, oh, by the way, they have barbarian rage, narratively expressing to them that this is a different situation. These aren't your normal bugbears. These bugbears are not just barbaric, but they're like blending into the snowbank, and they're barely seen. Yep, a hobgoblin who uses tactics like a fighter. Hell yeah. Goblins and kobolds that use traps and other things, maybe like alchemist abilities, or maybe they're just able to place reskinned things around the battlefield like traps, things trapping people's legs, snatching people's arms, restraining people, tricking them, things like that. Hell yeah, absolutely. So mixing it up, no big thing. So guys, thank you very much for joining me. Your time's very valuable. I'm glad you're able to leave here, hopefully, hopefully with just a little bit of change. Tomorrow is Future Friday. That's where we talk about everything from in the industrial age all the way into the far future. Many of you, I'm looking at you, Joe Key, many of you who are interested in modern day storytelling, science fiction, and that kind of thing, join me tomorrow. And of course, the theme is winter, so absolutely, please participate tomorrow. Bring up any and all of your things. We're definitely, believe you me, we will talk about those frozen moons with their aquatic insides, liquid on the inside, frozen on the outside. We're definitely going to talk about that. We're going to talk about nuclear winter as well, and heck, liquid nitrogen and all of the other frozen landscapes and frozen wintry elements we can think of. So guys, everyone have a great one. I'll see you tomorrow.